Good morning to all of you. We continue then today with the second text we're doing by Rousseau, the Creed of a Savoyard Vicar. And hopefully I'm planning to finish it today. We will then deal with the important passages, and next time we'll move on to Diderot in a rather short and interesting text, and the time after that we'll get to our last text, and it's of course Kant's. So, we are on page, in your reader, we are already on page 110 as far as Rousseau is concerned, and let us begin from there. I will mention something I mentioned before. We had in the 17th century and then in the 18th century, but rising in the 17th century, the notion of a state of nature. In other words, we were trying to define the human, not as it was before, for example, in the Greek definition of Aristotle's man definition. Man is, anthropos in Greek, is a rational animal, or man is a social animal, or man is a political animal. So we were trying to go in the 17th century, so after the discovery of the Americas, and what was considered to be the savage man, right? The wild man. Man as more basic than that. Man before anything like a society. Man before we can say of him he's political, he's social, and so on. All right? So in the 17th century, we wanted to go beyond Aristotle, we said, and to consider that man originally was not, in fact, social. So two names arise. In the 17th we have Hobbes, and in the 18th we have Rousseau. For Hobbes, who wrote the most important theory on this, he said man in the state of nature is motivated by one principle. That one principle is the principle of preservation. So all of us, in other words, men, wanted to preserve themselves. This is the only true principle operating in the state of nature for Hobbes. And because of this, the state of nature is a state of war of everyone against everyone. So it's not a state of peace, it's a state of war, because everyone looks for anything to preserve oneself. So everybody is seen as an enemy to you. And you try to acquire as much force against the others, but the others do the same. We are equal in the state of nature. And as a result, we have war of everyone against everyone. I'm being very brief. So the state of nature is a bad state. It's a state of war. And to get out of it, we enter into a contract together. We give our power and our freedom to a higher authority, which ensures that all the contracts are respected between individuals. We enter this way society. And Hobbes says the best system in this case is absolute monarchy, because the monarch will not need anything. He already has everything. He's not going to require more. And so he will ensure that the system continues and that we respect each other's private property, that we respect each other's contract and the contract we have among ourselves, and we have a state of peace thanks to this contract. So the state of nature for him is a state of war of everyone against everyone. Man is a wolf for man, very famous saying by Hobbes, homo homini lupus. So to get out of this, otherwise we will have perpetual war. So instead of preserving ourselves, we will be destroying continuously ourselves. So the principle of preservation in the state of nature doesn't function correctly because it leads to war and non-preservation. So for Hobbes, in a way, the state of nature is a contradictory state. For the simple reason that the preservation that is at its heart leads to non-preservation, all right? And we enter the state of society where we have peace. The other theory is Rousseau. And so when we are reading here on page 110, you have to keep in mind that Rousseau on 110, 11, 12, and so on is answering Hobbes. He's saying, no, this is not true. We are at the state of nature. In the state of nature, man is at peace. And it's when he enters the state of society that there is jealousies, there is hate, and there are wars. It's the opposite of Hobbes. Why does he say that? He says that because for him at the level of the state of nature, we have not one principle, the principle of preservation, amour de soi, love, self-love. We have also a second principle, which is the principle of pity. So there are two principles, the principle of preservation and the principle of pity. So the man in the state of nature is actually at peace, because not only does he love himself, so self-preservation, but he also has sympathy. He feels when he sees someone else suffering, so he doesn't go and kill others. And it's, again, when we enter society that we have war. So keep this in your mind as we read on, and I'm going to choose specific passages today with you, and we should be able afterwards to end our considerations of Rousseau. I will count lines today, so be patient and count with me. Page 110, we start from the top. My young friend, let us look within, he says. Let us set aside all personal prejudices and see whither our inclinations lead us. Do we take more pleasure in the sight of the suffering of others or their joys? Is it pleasanter to do a kind action or an unkind action? And which leaves the more delightful memory behind it? Why do you enjoy the theatre? Do you delight in the crimes you behold? Do you weep over the punishment which overtakes the criminal? They say, and they here you can place the word Hobbes. Hobbes says, and those who follow him, they say we are indifferent to everything but self-interest. All we care about is ourselves, our own preservation. Yet, notice, here's the contradiction that Rousseau brings. He doesn't agree. Yet we find our consolation in our sufferings in the charms of friendship and humanity. And even in our pleasures, we should be too lonely and miserable if we had no one to share them with us. If there is no such thing as morality in man's heart, as Hobbes says, what is the source of his rapturous admiration of noble deeds, his passionate devotion to great merit? So Rousseau is saying to us, there are feelings in us that are immediate in us, that we are born with. We don't learn them, right? This is the truth of the heart that I spoke about last time. This is the voice within, the inner voice. So in this, we don't only want to preserve ourselves, we want to actually share with others. We want the charms of friendship and humanity. We admire the noble deeds of other people. We admire great merit. And I jump to the next paragraph and line 4, at the end of line 4, next paragraph. If we see some act of violence or injustice in town or country, our hearts are at once stirred, moved to their depths by an instinctive anger and wrath, which bids us go to the help of the oppressed. All right, but we are restrained by a stronger duty, and the law deprives us of our right to protect the innocent. Jump with me, count from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. It says, we do not hate the wicked merely because of the harm they do to ourselves, but because they are wicked. Okay? Not only do we wish to be happy ourselves, we wish others to be happy too. Very opposite of Hobbes. And if this happiness does not interfere with our own happiness, it increases it. In conclusion, whether we wish to or not, whether we will or not, we pity the unfortunate. When we see their suffering, we suffer too. Okay? Two principles. The principle of preservation. We have self-love. We do love the self that we are. Otherwise, of course, everyone would commit suicide. This is also biblical, for there is no man who did not love himself, right? Jesus' words. So we love ourselves, but also we have pity for others, and we have compassion. When we see their suffering, we suffer too. Let's retrace here the word compassion's meaning. Compassion, it means to suffer with, literally. We speak of the passion of Christ on the cross, going on the way of the cross, the passion. Passion means to suffer, to receive things instead of to be acting, to be acted on. So we suffer with others. We have compassion. We have pity. All right? Next paragraph. Men speak of the voice of remorse, regret, the secret punishment of hidden crimes by which such are often brought to light. Alas, who does not know its unwelcome voice, right? إحساس بالذنب, بالتوبيخ. We speak from experience, and we would gladly stifle this imperious feeling which causes us such agony. Let us obey, now we underline again, for Rousseau, we must obey the call of nature. Not what men brought with their laws, who sometimes give us duties that go against our compassion for others. We must obey the call of nature. We shall see that her yoke is easy, and that when we give heed to her voice, very biblical language, Jesus says, my yoke is easy. The yoke is what you place on the bull, is what you place on the ox when you are cultivating the land. We shall see that her yoke is easy, and that when we give heed to her voice, when we obey her voice, we find a joy in the answer of a good conscience. The wicked fears and flees from the call of nature, which is conscience, that we spoke about last time. He delights to escape from himself. So when you are not listening to the voice within, to the conscience that is within you, and you find some reasoning, some other duty that you should obey from society, then you are escaping from yourself. You are not yourself. And I remind you too that this is often the definition of sin. Sin is when you do something that is not you, that does not augment what you are, increase you in being. I jump 3 lines. So the wicked fears and flees from her. He delights to escape from himself. And the opposite, the just man finds his peace within himself. So he listens to the call of nature. So that inner voice, you notice how we're being gradually more and more precise in defining it. This inner voice is the voice of conscience. This voice of conscience is the instinctual voice in us in a way. It's what we have immediately in us without reasoning. And this voice is the voice of nature, right? The call is the voice of nature, the call of nature. And this gives us joy. A joy, he says, which springs from the good man's heart. Right. Page 111. So, jump with me to the second paragraph. The first one speaks to us about the moral instinct, right? What is within us as immediate. It's again that voice of conscience, right? We have a moral immediacy in us that is the call of nature and the voice of conscience. There is therefore, second paragraph, very small, 3 lines, 4 lines. There is therefore at the bottom of our hearts, an innate principle of justice and virtue, by which, in spite of our maxims, we judge our own actions or those of others to be good or evil. And it is this principle that I call conscience. Okay, once again, then Rousseau here is giving us more precision. He's giving us the definition of what he called conscience. Please learn these very short 4 lines. You will need them for your exams. So, conscience is the innate principle in our hearts of justice and virtue. It tells us what is good and evil, in other words. So we don't need someone giving us systems, giving us a positive law. It means a law put down, written by humans, written by humans following a certain system, be it rational or not, be it instituted by a religion or by something else, by a party, for example. No, Rousseau says, God has put in us this innate principle. God put in us the voice of conscience. We have something immediate that was covered over. We may ask, so why don't we get to it? It's because, remember what I said, we live in society. When we moved from the state of nature, where this innate principle was functioning very well, you didn't need to get to it, it was there. It was how things worked. When we got into the state of society, this innate principle was covered over by so many rules, by so many laws, by jealousy, by hate of others, by xenophobia toward other nations. You can add hundreds and thousands of things that covered this. So we have Rousseau saying we have to get back to it. We have to make an education that takes us back to it. This is what this book is about, right? The book Émile, from where we get this passage. It's to try to give an education that follows the call of nature, that goes back to our moral instinct, that go back to this conscience, that gives us in our hearts what is good and evil, what is virtuous and unjust, tells us what is virtuous and not virtuous, just and unjust. Okay. And we go again, now we continue, page 112. Please, the paragraph on top. For this purpose, to get to what is right, to know what is right, for this purpose it is enough to lead you to distinguish between our acquired ideas and our natural feelings. Again, we acquire these ideas how? From a certain education, from a certain life and societies. We have to distinguish between them and between the feelings that are in us and that are natural, the call of nature. Why do we distinguish between them? How and how? Why? Well, for feeling precedes knowledge. Okay? So what is more true to us, what is in us before anything else is added, especially in the social structure, is feeling. So feeling precedes knowledge. This prepares us to what? This prepares us for romanticism. The Romantics, much later, about 50 years after, will start speaking of feeling as more true, as more immediate, and more true to things, true to nature, than reason, which, of course, is the organization of nature, which comes afterwards, than the understanding which wants to control things. This is why Romantics will like the forests more than they would like the gardens that are organized by reason. So Rousseau is announcing that already. So, feeling precedes knowledge. And since we do not learn to seek what is good for us and avoid what is bad for us, but get this desire from nature, in the same way the love of good and the hatred of evil are as natural to us as our self-love. The decrees of conscience are not judgments, but feelings. There is no judgment there. There is no logical structure. Although our ideas come from without, the feelings by which they are weighed are within us. And it is by these feelings alone that we perceive fitness or unfitness of things in relation to ourselves, which leads us to seek or to avoid, shun these things. Right? So we have to trust, for Rousseau, our natural feeling. Okay? How we get morality? How do we learn to love the good and hate the evil? Not through an education in society, but also naturally. So we go back to what I told you. We have amour de soi, self-love. This is the principle of preservation. All right? And we have another principle that is also natural, that tells us what is good and what is bad. And this is, of course, in relation to others also. This is our judgment. Our conscience, of course. So we feel with others, we have compassion with others, for others, we suffer with them, and we also have self-love. We preserve ourselves. I continue with the next paragraph a bit. To exist, please underline, is to feel. Famous saying of Rousseau's. To exist is to feel. Okay. Our feeling is undoubtedly earlier than our intelligence, and we had feelings before we had ideas. Whatever may be the cause of our being, it has provided for our preservation by giving us feelings suited to our nature. And no one can deny that these at least are in us, innate. These feelings, so far as the individual is concerned, are self-love, again, preservation. And then fear, pain, the dread of death, the desire for comfort. Simple things that are also connected to self-love. Again, if, as it is impossible to doubt, man is by nature sociable, or at least fitted to become sociable, he can only be so by means of other innate feelings, relative to his kind. For if only physical well-being were considered, men would certainly be scattered rather than brought together. But the motive power of conscience is derived from the moral system formed through this twofold relationship to himself and to his fellow men. To know good is not to love it. This knowledge is not innate in man, but as soon as his reason leads him to perceive it, his conscience impels him to love the good. It is this feeling which is innate. Okay? So Rousseau is saying, all right, perhaps we can be with other men because we can live with other men, but not, as Hobbes says, because we are afraid of them. And so we have to have a contract. We have to give our freedom to a higher power that terrorizes all of us. We are afraid of it. We are afraid of the police, and that's why we don't honor our contracts. No, Rousseau says, we are with others out of love for others, pity and sympathy for others. So we love ourselves and we have sympathy and compassion to others. And this constitutes the building blocks of our moral system, or should, if we build a good moral system. Right? Last paragraph on this page, count with me. We may be men without being scholars in line 2, and then jump 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. How is it, he asks, that so few give heed to the voice of nature? Why do so few people heed the voice of nature, since it's within us, since it's innate, since it's there always already? He says, because nature speaks to us in the language of nature. And in society, and everything in society, in fact, leads us to forget that language, that tongue. Conscience is timid. She loves peace and retirement. She is startled by noise and calculation, numbers. And last 2 lines, when conscience, when she has been scorned, when we despised her, hated her, when she has been scorned so long, it is, of course, as hard to recall her as it was to get rid of her, to banish her. Okay? So, Rousseau says, like I told you, in fact, it's covered over by so many things, this voice of conscience, that we have to find little by little our way back to it. We have to find little by little our way back to listening to the voice of nature. I think this covers all of what we need to know in the creed of the Savoyard Priest. I'm not going to enter so much into the details of the critique of organized religion, but I wish to finish the text on page 115, leaving it open to your reflections. Rousseau says in the second paragraph on page 115, speaking of God, line 5, I hold intercourse with him, with God. I exchange with God. I immerse all my powers in his divine essence. I am overwhelmed. I find it incredible. It covers me completely. I am overwhelmed by his kindness. Notice, I bless him and his gifts, but I do not pray to him. Why should I ask of him to change the order of nature, to work miracles on my behalf? And jump 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. Neither do I ask of him the power to do right. Why should I ask what he has given me already? God has already given me conscience, the call of nature, the inner voice of conscience. So I already have the ability to do what is right. So why should I ask for it? And last paragraph, and my well-founded self-distrust, the only thing I ask of God, or rather expect from his justice, is to correct my error if I go astray, if I make a mistake, if that error is dangerous to me. So if I make some mistake, if I am unable to judge well because of everything that covered over my conscience, this is perhaps where I may ask for help. We stop here. I'm very happy we finished this wonderful text. I hope you got really how wonderful, how excellent Rousseau is here, how very precise he is in determining the voice of conscience, in moving step by step, and in fact, in deconstructing entirely the arguments of Hobbes, if we read this creed very well. I thank you for listening. You'll be happy to know that there is no homework, no assignment here. We will eventually have one when we will compare Kant and Rousseau. So we have time for this. Please, however, this is a very, 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 very important text for the final exam. So keep it in mind. Now, I'm giving you some details about the exam. Your exam will be on the 15th. Will be on the 15th of May. From 11, it's shorter than before, so it will be shorter exam from 11 to 1 p.m. So from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the 15th of May. And it will be done, if there's any changes I'll tell you, but normally this is the instruction we got. It will be done by Moodle. So please make sure you go on Moodle. I am already putting the link to the lectures I'm giving you on Moodle, and we will be doing it through Moodle. In other words, if we start at 11, you will go on Moodle, you will get the topic question, we will see what it is, and you will have 2 hours to finish and send back on Moodle. After 2 hours, maybe I'll give 5 minutes more, it will be shut and you cannot anymore submit your exam. So you really have very restricted time, and you have to make sure from today, make sure that on the 15th of May you have access to internet, you are in a place where you can be isolated and work. Okay? I will give you more details as I get, of course, more details. But for now then, it will be on Moodle, 15th of May from 11 to 1 p.m. The second thing I want to mention is the grade distribution. It will be 30% for the midterm, which you already did, 30% for the assignments, and 40% for the final. So the assignments are basically the homework I give you, the assignments I give you, I will take all those that I graded, and I will average them together on 30. So I think you will have at least one more assignment. You already have one that is not graded and two that are graded. So we have 2 grades already. We'll have probably a third one and maybe a fourth one. We will see. But for sure we'll have a third one. And of these assignments together will be over 30. Meanwhile, stay safe. Next time, please read Diderot. So it's a very easy text from page 116 to page 116 to 124. This is our next class. If we have time, I'm not sure. We may need the hour still for Diderot, even if it's simple, but we'll definitely not need more. Then we will move to, of course, Kant. And from his introduction to, from his foundation for the metaphysics of morals. All right. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you next Friday, this coming Friday.